Welcome to another episode of the Remade Life podcast. In this episode, I'm sharing my experience of my first 101 days of being medication free. I'll share the good and the not so fun side of living medication free. I'm Coach Danny. Let's talk about it. Are you ready to rewrite your story and embrace a new perspective on healing autoimmune disease? Hey, I'm Daniela Spear, and I'm fascinated by exploring the human body, movement, and how emotions help to create our life's journey. After a transforming experience helped me to heal over 15 years of autoimmune symptoms, I decided to share what it looks like to have a second chance at a more compassionate relationship with my body. In this podcast, I will guide you in building lasting wellness by tapping into your body's innate wisdom, understanding the emotional roots of autoimmune disease, and how to use strength training not just for working out, but as a tool to heal from within. So get ready to revive your most inner joys, rebuild your health, and reclaim your life. This is the Remade Life podcast. Hello. Okay, 101 days medication free. Full transparency, I had intended for this to be a 90-day update, like a 3-month update, but here we are, 101 days, because life happens, and that's okay. I'm sharing my experience of being off of medication, but first, for those of you who are new to my space and might be wondering, what the heck is she talking about? I'll share a little backstory. Full disclaimer first, nothing in this episode is to be considered medical advice. I am not a doctor. I am simply just sharing my experience of being medication free. So, repeat after me. I am a grown adult. I make my own decisions about my health. Coach Danny is the best. Okay, make sure you repeat that last one a few more times. All right, so in episode 2, I shared about the transforming experience that I had that led me to a huge mindset shift around my identity with autoimmune disease. Since then, I was able to reduce my medication in the fall of 2022, and then in early 2023, I was dismissed from my liver specialist and have just solely been under the care of my rheumatologist for this year. In the spring of this year, 2023, I asked my doctor if I could get off of medication, and he said yes. Which, to me, whenever I tell that story, it always sounds like a proposal, like when I say, he said yes. And I laugh because I was actually really shocked at how casually he said, yeah, go for it. I mean, I was a bit hesitant, and I felt like as soon as he said yes, I was like, wait, what? Are you sure? Like, I had prepared this whole speech about why I should be able to get off medication, and you're not going to let me present it? Like, what do you mean yes? Apparently, there are no side effects to tapering off of Plaquenil, according to my doctor. So he was totally fine with me getting off of it. And I mean, I do want to share that I believe, part of the reason why he was so willing to move forward with that was because he's known me for a long time and knows that I practice a generally healthy lifestyle. So I think that there was that trust there. So for me to still implement a healthy lifestyle even after getting off medications. So I think that also played a huge role into it. So instead of just getting off of Plaquenil right away, we made a plan to taper for 3 months. I had been taking Plaquenil Monday through Friday, and I tapered down to Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then in about June, I think, I went down to just Monday and Fridays. So it's kind of like progressively like spacing out those dosages. And then in July of this year, I completely came off of Plaquenil and have been living my best medication-free life. So let's get into those details. What does that best medication-free life look like? So a couple of days before I was supposed to get off of medication, I woke up with what felt like a heart attack. So this was at the end of June. I had a stabbing pain through my chest. The pain was radiating into my shoulder and my jaw. I was having difficulty breathing, so I went to the ER. Turns out it was just some really intense, and I do mean intense, heartburn and indigestion. I mean, I've had heartburn before, but never like that, and this has actually happened 2 more times since then, and I found out that it was actually a costovertebral joint disjunction. So where my rib meets my spine in my back, I had a little bit of a disjunction there, and that was also the culprit of some chronic shoulder pain that I've been dealing with for a couple of years. So what does this have to do with me getting off of medication? I will explain. First, I do want to say I'm going to link a podcast episode that my mentor and friend, Anna Hartman, did on her podcast, Unreal Results, where she explains this whole costovertebral joint disjunction. So I had worked with her, and she helped me to identify what was the cause of this really intense heartburn pain that I was having. The episode is really great. I'm going to link it in the show notes. You should take a listen to it if you also ever deal with really intense gastric reflux or any kind of indigestion type of symptoms. I think it might be helpful for you. So I will link that in the show notes. But okay, back to getting off of medication. What does this heartburn thing have to do with getting off medication? Well, one of the first realizations I had with tapering and then getting off of medication was that my body was a lot more sensitive to certain foods than when I was on a higher dose of medication that was controlling inflammation. So foods that contain gluten, high fatty foods, which are acidic and cause inflammation, things like coffee and alcohol, were irritating my esophagus and digestive tract, which in turn was irritating the costovertebral joint disjunction. So I think I will also do a whole other episode explaining this story about how Anna helped me fix this. But like I said, I will link that episode that she did in the show notes. The important thing to note here is that inflammatory foods that were not bothering me on a higher dose of medication were definitely now bothering me. And also the costovertebral joint thing irritating my esophagus and adding to the sensitivity of these foods. So both factors were interacting with each other there. Did I cut these foods out forever? No, absolutely not. If you know me, you know I'm not about that life of just cutting out foods, which I think I will also do another episode on about why I'm not about cutting out foods all willy-nilly. I simply just adjusted how often I was consuming them, trusting that my body would adjust to being on a lower dose of medication. And then after working with my mentor to adjust my little rib that was out of place there, things have been a lot better with my digestion. So I've just sort of have given myself some time, and I've given myself some grace and patience in allowing my body to adjust to the lower dose of medication. So know that if you are in a place where you are tapering and wanting to come off of medication, you might experience some sensitivity that you didn't experience before. I know one thing that is often really difficult for people to understand is that, something that you didn't experience before and suddenly you're experiencing it now, we tend to say things like, well, this has never happened before. Well, of course it's never happened before because You've never been in the situation that you are now. So, like I said, if you are either tapering or getting off medication, know that you're probably going to experience some sensitivity that you didn't have while you were on medication. The other thing that has been not so fun has been dealing with some hand and finger inflammation and pain. This has probably been like the most frequent occurrence. It's something that I definitely expected to happen once I came off of medication, only because it was already happening when I was tapering medication. It was something that I started to address with increasing hydration and increasing lymphatic drainage in my upper extremities. So when I started tapering medication, the hand and finger inflammation and pain started showing up. And so I started addressing it then by increasing my water intake, being a little bit more mindful to do my lymphatic drainage exercises. And so I knew that when I came off of medication, so like lowering that dose all the way down to 0, I expected that I would also experience that, and that has certainly been the case. So I was somewhat mentally prepared for that, and I have been addressing it the exact same way that I addressed it while I was still on medication, and it's been working out really well. So in my ebook, Unlocking Your Body Secrets, A Guide to Understanding Your Emotions and Healing Chronic Symptoms, I will also link that in the show notes, I talk about a neurology concept called the threat bucket. Is it like what's the word? Is it like an analogy or a metaphor? We'll just call it a concept. I don't know. English is my second language. Anyways, so this threat bucket, it represents how the nervous system communicates with the body. You take a whole life perspective and assess your life's threat bucket, everything that you've ever experienced across your entire life, your childhood experiences. I mean, even like your birthing experience, like what you experience as a baby being born, right? Like all of that plays a role in that. Your living environment, any accidents or injuries you had growing up, or like as an adult, any relationships, medications, health history, your nutrition, and so on. It all goes into this bucket. And if you don't start to address some of those things in your bucket, eventually it's going to get full. And when it overflows, that's when you experience pain, or in this case, autoimmune symptoms. You can also do a more recent view of your threat bucket, everything that you've experienced like in the last week. And this is something I do regularly, especially when I wake up with symptoms. I assess, how have I been eating this week? What are my hydration levels like? What is my sleep quality? Interactions I've had with other people, the intensity of my workouts, any like school and workload, where am I in my menstrual cycle? Like all of these things absolutely do influence the expression of autoimmune symptoms, or how like easily they are expressed. Like I said, if that threat bucket is full and it overflows, you're going to experience symptoms. And when I start to assess all the things that I've maybe experienced in the past week, my response is usually like, yeah, that makes sense. So when I've woken up with joint pain in my hands, I can usually point back to multiple factors that are contributing to that overflow in my threat bucket. So here's how I have been specifically addressing the joint pain in my hands and fingers. I increase my hydration, water plus electrolytes, because remember, hydration is not just how much water you drink, it's how much water your body absorbs. So taking water with electrolytes is going to help your cells absorb that water. I've increased my veggie intake, again, hydrating foods, and then I focus on gentle movement and soft tissue work that supports my fascial system. All of this is to help drain inflammation away from the joints and support nourishing fluid flow into the joints. I also make sure I do my head and neck lymphatic massage that I learned from Dr. Perry Nicholson. He is on Instagram at Stop Chasing Pain. He is a great resource for learning about lymphatic movement. I will link my YouTube video as well as Dr. Perry's Instagram in the show notes. I realize I'm linking a lot of things, but all of those things will be there in the show notes. So I usually do that head and neck lymphatic drainage like 2 to 3 times a week, but during periods where I'm having increased symptoms, I will do it every day that week. And I really do notice a difference. And by the way, if you are experiencing autoimmune symptoms of any kind, which I assume is likely why you're listening to this podcast, the head and neck lymphatic massage is a must. It is something I teach all of my clients. It's usually where we start to reduce systemic inflammation. So I highly recommend you start to implement that as well. Like I said, that 5-minute head and neck lymphatic massage video linked in the show notes. So check it out. And then the other thing I do is really focus on my sleep hygiene. Something I started doing earlier this year when I started tapering off of medication was putting my phone out of reach so that I'm not in bed just scrolling at the end of the day. I also started to just get into bed earlier and just lay there without a book or anything, just me and my thoughts. So it's something that I started doing to practice some self-regulation before bed, and it has been amazing. Something so simple yet so effective, and sure enough, a good night's sleep always either significantly decreases or completely eliminates the pain in my hands and fingers. So sleep is crucial. And I know that sleep is a bit of a touchy subject for most people because most people have terrible sleep. So my advice is just start spending more time in bed. Just allow yourself the time and space for sleep. When I started to just spend more time in bed at night, I actually started sleeping longer. But I mean, I'll be honest, sleep is something that is a continual work in progress for me. I've not mastered, the secret to sleep. But before you go trying to fix things with like supplements or blaming your hormones or your anxiety, just start addressing your sleep. Like spend more time in bed, like create that sleeping environment. Allow like your body to recognize, okay, when is it time to wind down, instead of just going straight from either your phone or your TV or, whatever it is, and then straight to bed. Like get into bed earlier and let your body start adjusting to the idea of like winding down. Like, okay, we're going to sleep. Like fix your sleep, people. That's what I have to say. That's my advice for this episode is fix your sleep. So another thing that I have done in addressing pain and inflammation since getting off medication is decreasing my workload, being mindful of how my mental load impacts me physically. Again, this is another thing that is a work in progress for me. I own a business. I see clients. I run all the back end things of my business, and I'm also in school right now. So sometimes decreasing my workload just is not possible, but I have certainly been a lot more mindful of like, okay, I'm cutting work off at this time. So I just cut out anything that is not essential for that day or the next day or that week. So this is like, when I'm experiencing heightened symptoms, I will just cut out any of the non-essential things. I have delayed projects or postponed client sessions. Not my favorite thing to do, but if I need to, I'll do it in an effort to rest and have a lighter workload. And I realize that is not possible for everyone, but that is one benefit of being a business owner. So I do what I want. But if you work for someone else, I would recommend developing a delegation plan for when you are experiencing high autoimmune activity, because that's usually an invitation to rest more physically and mentally. So to recap, this is what I have done over the last 101 days to prevent autoimmune flare-ups and address symptoms when they do come up. Increased focus on hydration, increased lymphatic drainage, sleep, make that a priority, and I manage my workload. So overall, I feel I've done a pretty good job at managing symptoms since getting off of medications. So yes, I do still experience symptoms, but I think that's preferred as I have learned to see symptoms as patterns of protection and communication rather than like my body just going crazy, right? I don't think I would want my body to go completely silent because then I would have no idea what's going on. I've learned to see these symptoms as signs of communication from my body when it is requesting rest, when it's requesting increased hydration, increased nutrients, and just having more like space, like headspace. So to be honest though, like some days like it does feel like I'm just trying to do whatever necessary to keep my threat bucket from overflowing, right? Sometimes life just gets busy and you don't necessarily have all the time in the world to, process things or address, all the things in your threat bucket. We can't necessarily do all of those at the same time. But I think that that's just part of the process of like getting to know my body, right? And just taking it one day at a time. I'm getting to know my body all over again. I'm getting to know my body without medication. And that, after 15 years of being on medication, it's certainly a new thing. So I knew that like getting into this, that I would experience things differently than I did on medication. And that has certainly been true. And aside from addressing these symptoms, the biggest one I think is the patience and understanding that I have had with my body. I definitely noticed that I don't get as frustrated about my symptoms as I used to. And this is because of the amount of work I did on my relationship with my body long before getting off of medication. And I know that developing a relationship with your body doesn't sound like the most like fun thing. It's definitely not a quick fix, but it's something that I'm really proud of myself for working on continually over the last couple of years. I've moved away from this place of blame and anger and instead owning responsibility and knowing that I do have influence over how my immune system responds. I have learned to like be more understanding and have some compassion when I wake up with a flare up of symptoms. And instead of getting frustrated, I take on this posture of curiosity and I start to explore like, okay, what has caused this? What has contributed to this? And I, go through that threat bucket assessment. That worksheet is in my ebook and I use it often to do an assessment. And like I said earlier, my response is usually like, okay, yeah, like that makes sense. And that has really helped me to just be more understanding of the way my body's responding because more often than not, I realize like, okay, it hasn't had the best like environment to thrive like over the last couple of days or week or whatever it is. So I have had some big life things that I've done since getting off medication. And one of them was taking an international trip to Italy to see one of my best friends get married. We were there for about 10 days. I did take the medication with me just because I didn't know how my body would respond to traveling without medication. I just didn't have any previous evidence of what that would be like. So I took it with me just to be safe, but I actually didn't need it. I felt pretty good for most of the trip, except for my digestive system. It was definitely taking a hit with all the breads and pasta and pizza. Things were not moving. So let me assure you, I did fully embrace all the food while I was there, but it certainly had an impact on my digestive system. It took a couple of weeks for my digestion to get back to normal after the trip. But again, I knew my body was already more sensitive to certain foods being off of medication. So I kind of expected that. And I think that just having that awareness like helped me to not freak out about having symptoms. I think freaking out can just exacerbate symptoms even more. So again, going back to that building a relationship with your body, like that's really important in learning to navigate autoimmunity because you learn the patterns of your body and you spend less time freaking out about it. And the second thing that I've done is start massage therapy school. So this has been a huge life adjustment, but I'm absolutely loving it. And I can't wait to start to incorporate massage therapy into how I help my clients heal and feel better. So these first 101 days have honestly been amazing. A lot of new experiences, a lot of, familiar ones, and definitely a lot of trial and error and a lot of learning. A couple weeks ago, I was actually sitting outside during our lunch break at school, and I just felt like this sense of peace. And I started to get really teary because I realized, wow, I'm feeling so good. I actually feel better than when I was on medication. And I was a bit emotional because I just didn't realize how good I could feel. I didn't know that that was possible. And how can you know, until you're actually there? And I was feeling really good, and now I feel so much more connected to myself. I mean, don't get me wrong, I definitely feel things in a heightened way, and that doesn't always feel great, but just experiencing my body as it is, without medication, has been nothing short of a miracle, and it feels amazing. These first 101 days have been a learning experience, and I suspect that it'll continue to be a learning experience, but I'm really excited to continue to get to know my body and myself and experience a life free from medication, and hopefully free from autoimmune symptoms altogether. It's still a work in progress. So, some reminders that I'm taking with me into the next 101 days, or just really the rest of my life, is, be gentle with myself. And, I encourage you to maybe write these down too, and let them be reminders for you. Even if you're not in a place where you're ready to get off medication, start to be kind and gentle with your body now. So be gentle with myself. My body is intelligent, so trusting that my body is intelligent. I can trust my body. I can trust myself. Get some sleep and drink some water. Okay, I hope this episode has been helpful for you and maybe has inspired you to see that living medication-free, even after taking it for 15 years or more, is absolutely possible. Thank you for joining me for this very special episode. This was more of just a life update rather than teaching. So, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And I know I'm going to look back and be so proud of myself for sharing this part of autoimmunity, because I think that there's certainly a lot of sharing the not so fun part of autoimmunity, the sickness and the illness, the struggles. And I think that there does need to be more stories like this of showing people that it is possible to get off of medication. It is possible to heal your symptoms, and it is possible to live in freedom from autoimmune disease. So if you have any questions about my medication-free journey, you can reach out to me on Instagram at daniela.spear, or send me an email at hello@remadewellness.com. Okay, until next time, be well, my friends.